The House Financial Services Committee is holding a hearing on student loan borrowing. That committee is looking at ways to hold student loan servicing companies, quote, accountable, and several Democratic legislative proposals that would change federal laws governing student loans. Joining us from Washington is Yahoo Finance's Jessica Smith. What have you got for us, Jess?
Adam, there's an interesting divide in this hearing today. Republicans say that this committee shouldn't even be holding this hearing. They say it's not in their jurisdiction. Chairwoman Maxine Waters says she believes it's the first hearing on student lending that the committee has ever held, and she says it is long overdue. They've covered a range of topics throughout this hearing since it started this morning, just from the overall cost of college and how much it is, and as these 18-year-old borrowers are trying to figure out all of these complicated loan agreements. They've also talked about the $1.6 trillion in outstanding debt and the impact that has on the economy as a whole. We have some interesting names testifying today. One of them is Seth Frotman. You might remember that name because he was an official at the CFPB, at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, until he resigned last year, saying that the Trump administration had turned its back on student borrowers. You also have Hasan Minhaj, the host of the Patriot Act on Netflix. They had an episode focused on the student debt crisis, and it really hit home with a lot of people. Here's what he told lawmakers in his opening statements this morning.
We know the deck is stacked against student borrowers in ways that it wasn't 10 or even 15 years ago. And they deserve some basic protections. Americans should not have to go bankrupt pursuing higher education, and they should never be preyed upon by underregulated loan servicing companies. So members of this committee, we know the government is capable of stepping in during a financial crisis. So really all I'm asking today is, why can't we treat our student borrowers the way we treat our banks? Because 44 million Americans, that is too big to fail.
Democratic lawmakers are proposing a range of options to deal with this, from helping borrowers buy their first home to having a student borrower's bill of rights. Republicans aren't really on board with those ideas, so we'll see if they can find any common ground in the coming weeks. Adam.
Indeed, we will. Thanks, Jess. Joining us now is Yahoo Finance's Aarthi Swaminathan, who has been covering this for us as well. Aarthi, we heard some of the stats that Hasan Minhaj was talking about just there. But I don't know that we can hold out much hope that Congress is going to be able to agree to do something on this.
It was so much hand-wringing, right? Like, everyone is like, what do we do with this? This is a crisis. Some of them disagree that this is a crisis. But I see two perspectives. One is that they bring, Republicans are calling student loans to come back into the private industry, which is what it was before 2010. On the other side, they acknowledge that this is something that we need to fix, that predatory student loan services need to be, monitored and all that. So they completely disagree. So to me, it seems like it's not likely, like we're not likely to have any solution anytime soon. And then you have the Department of Education, which is just pushing back so much. So it just seems a little scary.
Has anybody calculated the total cost and the percent of those who would seek, a refuge through bankruptcy if we were to open up the law to allow the disbursement of this debt through normal bankruptcy law? Would it be 10%? What would the hit be to the U.S. taxpayer?
We have not seen a concerted effort to study, because a lot of these loans are in forbearance. You can put it in, they're in default, they're in delinquency. So we don't have one way to calculate these things. And the government is trying to centralize this to understand the impact of this. But even that, they cannot even do, because all these student loan services don't want to work with each other just for the federal government to understand the whole scope of things. Isn't that crazy?
I would beg somebody to clarify exactly what the problem is. I don't think the problem is simply that students take out debt to finance their way through college, right? I mean, are we saying that all student debt is a problem? I don't think so. And I will tell you that I've covered the college education plans of some of the Democratic candidates, especially Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. To different degrees, they want to make college free and forgive all student debt or most student debt. And I hear from people who say, okay, what about me? I paid my student loans. I mean, what about all the people who pay their student loans, which is the way it's supposed to work? They're sitting here saying, why are you, I'm glad I was able to take out loans to go to college. It seems to me that you need to put parameters on this. Predatory loans would be a problem. Excessive amounts of loans taken out by borrowers who really have no idea what they're getting into, that is a problem. But student debt in itself is not inherently a problem.
Life ain't fair, Rick. I mean, that's, these things.
I'm the one giving that lecture.
Right. I mean, life's not fair. These things happen sometimes. But I think when you talk about on the college side, making things free, I mean, that's really the bigger issue, right? It's not just predatory lending, it's that college is so expensive.
Right.
Yes.
Well, we are in a political season now. You're 13 and a half months away from an election. We are having, as a society, we're going to have a debate on income inequality and what we should do about it. And this is a subset of that debate. So I expect to see a lot of this in the news and no action until we have the next election.
Aarthi, as we wrap this up, has anyone addressed the fact that the student loan program as it has existed has potentially caused the price of college to go up? It's almost like easy money.
Yeah, that's something that the Wall Street Journal highlighted because of all these income-driven repayment plans allowing them student loan services to exploit loopholes. But one congressman actually brought it up because you can borrow so much and you have no clear underwriting method, they can just inflate all these prices. And
they do.
And they do because they don't have, the government doesn't fund them as much anymore, right? All these different schools. And so they have to find a way to fill that gap in funding. And
well, if that's the case, and there is a good economic case that happens, then the problem is that college education is too expensive. That's not necessarily a problem with debt. That is that the education itself, the product itself is too expensive, and data does show that the cost of college education has risen much higher than overall inflation. So that is a factor.